much. It is such an honour to be here, and I'm going to do my very, very best to run to time because I know you must all be starving. I certainly am. I'm going to do two things, so it's a little bit complicated because Herb and I had a bit of a chat about what I should talk about. He said you would feel really cheated if we didn't talk a little bit about tomorrow's world. And he also wanted to really encourage you to understand how important you are if you were inspired by tomorrow's world at now, inspiring the next generation. So I've tried to combine the two, and to make it just a little bit more interesting, there is a bottle of champagne that will be placed behind the bar this evening for the winner of the Never Mind the Digits quiz, which we are now about to play. And what we're going to do is to take a romp through tomorrow's world, and also the new work that I'm doing with an organisation called TeenTech, which I set up because 5 years ago I got so frustrated that never had there been more exciting technology around, and never had young people been less aware that they could be creating it as well as consuming it. So I'm just going to get my little clicker thing and begin our story. That is just to show, for anyone in the audience who has not seen Tomorrow's World, the frightening amount of time that I have been on television. It's the best part of 35 years. And this is a really important picture. In this month, July 1965, I was sitting on a beach in Skegness. I'm on the left-hand side, throttling the dog. Meanwhile, in an office in Shepherd's Bush, the producers were trying to think of a name for a new programme about science and technology. And they came up with the idea of Modern Times. So the editor went home and gleefully told his wife that this is what this programme was going to be called. And she said, "That is the most awful programme title I've ever heard. For heaven's sake, call it Tomorrow's World." So now you hear it from me that Tomorrow's World was invented by a woman, which at least 50% of this audience suspected all along. So, what was I watching on Tomorrow's World in that era? Very interesting. So, if you watch Tomorrow's World, I don't know how many of you are old enough to go back to the 60s, you'll be able to tell me which invention was not featured in the 1960s. You need to keep a paper record and a tally, because I've not had time to get around with all of the marking sheets for this. Okay, so quickly decide in your mind which one was not shown. And the answer is the digital watch. All of those other things, you may think that the tilting train was a later invention. It wasn't. The school computer showed its face in 1965. It was called Nellie. But the digital watch didn't appear until the 70s, when it cost a phenomenal amount of money. I think it was £142. And if you compare that to the fact that I was at university in Manchester in 1974 and my rent was £4 a week, it gives you an idea of just how expensive that first digital watch was. I mean, you can see from this, you know, how awesome a job it is working on Tomorrow's World. I mean, it's not a job really, it was just an absolute pleasure. All sorts of technology emerging, and because the programme ran for such a length of time, over well, I think it's 35 years, you can see how the technology develops. How many of you had a ZX80? Do we have any? Oh, okay, Ron. Here is a question for you, because the ZX80, Sinclair was monumental in getting the computer into the home, because he said it will never be in every home until we can get it under 100 quid. So the ZX80 costs less than £100, but you could also buy it in kit form, where you soldered it all together. So how much did it cost in kit form? Remember to keep a record of the answers, and the answer is £79.95. Did any of the people who put their hands up, did any of you solder it together? You did? Marvellous, what a man. Do you still have it? Is it in your attic? Oh, see, once you put it together, you can't bear to part with it, can you? Right, here's a real nerdy question. This might... the ZX81 had its own printer, but how big was it? 4 inches, correct. It was 4 inches, and there it is in all of its glory. There's the very first mobile phone, held by mic rod. The one on the right-hand side, I feel I have some claim to because I did the first mobile phone conference. And BT gave me one of these so that I knew what I was talking about. And I picked it up in London, went back to my home in Newbury on the train. And when I was in Paddington, I was sitting in a carriage and it rang, because I'd given my husband the number, and I pulled it out of my bag, and for once it was easy to find my mobile phone in my bag. And I went, yes, I'm on a train. And so I do like to think I was the very first person to say those words. But the reaction of everyone in the carriage was very different, because we had people going, oh, what is it? Can I make a call too? And they all had a go. It was fantastic. It caused a real stir. Now that cost £3,000 if you wanted one of those. I couldn't afford to have one of those. But how long could you talk on it for? 30 minutes. Mind you, it didn't matter because it was so heavy, you couldn't hold it any longer. You know, oh, I'm going to put this phone down. I've been on it for 3 minutes. I mean, when you look at all of these things, I mean, it's fascinating when you see, it's a real lesson about innovation, actually, when you see that, like, Dyson's cleaner was shown on Tomorrow's World. I think it was probably about 15 years before it actually hit the marketplace. I mean, and he went through thousands and thousands of prototypes, over 7,000. You can't help but think his wife would be thinking, just give up on the cleaner. You know, move on to something else, give up on the cleaner. And I demonstrated the supermarket barcode reader. I mean, my daughter can't believe that I'm old enough to have demonstrated such a thing. And because the BBC deemed that it was a little bit risky because it had a laser, it meant that we pre-recorded the item, because Tomorrow's World was always like, and they put a safety officer on every door so that no one could get in, apart from me and the crew, who were clearly deemed to be expendable. But it took about 45 minutes to scan a tin of processed peas. And I remember thinking, if they reckon this is going into Sainsbury's, they're barking. So you can hold, you know, world-beating technology in your hands. But you'll have noticed that the CD was demonstrated by Kieran Prenderville. He was equally doubtful, actually, about the CD, and it's worth looking at that. I think you can look at it on the BBC archive online, and his sort of parting shot at the end of his demo is, well, whether this ever replaces vinyl remains to be seen. But of course, in a funny kind of way, you know, vinyl probably will outlast the CD. Anyway, here is the question. What was the first album to be released on the CD? Right, who thinks it's 3? Just put how many hands up? You are wrong. You are wrong. That was the first album to sell 1 million on CD. ABBA was the first to be produced but not sold, but it was Billy Joel and 52nd Street. And it's a really good quiz question because that always catches people out. Now, these are some of the things that I held in my paws for the very first time. And I do find it really exciting to think that I showed, well, the UK, the first digital camera, the first demonstration of virtual reality, and yes, the electric blanket that knew where your hot bits were. And because there always was this kind of mix of, it did, yes, get a mixed reaction, because sometimes on Tomorrow's World we were slightly literal, and I had to wear a pair of pyjamas to demonstrate that, and it did show you where your hot bits were, and there were quite a few complaints. I take a real pride, though, in the things that I did show, and sometimes I forget that I didn't actually invent them. I just showed them on the television. So, which item didn't appear on Tomorrow's World in the 90s? Any ideas? Just shout them out. What do you think? Sorry, the internet. You think it was the internet? No, all of those things appeared on Tomorrow's World in the 90s, except for RDS radio, which appeared a little bit earlier. But it has to be said that the first demonstration of the internet on Tomorrow's World, it was very much en passing. I think it probably, you know, the electric blanket that knew where your hot bits were got more time than the internet, because the idea of what this would actually mean, like many people, you know, the team didn't actually grasp. So that's a bit of a hop and a skip through some of my experiences on Tomorrow's World. And now I want to move on to what I want you to do, because if you were inspired by Tomorrow's World, I think you have an obligation to inspire the next generation of young people. Here are 300 of them. This is at one of our TeenTech events. And they're very interesting. This is the only time, incidentally, they ever sit down. And we have voting buttons, so we ask them a number of questions. And I thought you might be interested in just hearing the kind of answers that they give. So one of the questions we asked, we were in Wales last week, and we asked them this. You can also learn a bit of Welsh. You see, always seeking to educate. Now that won't surprise you. Another question that we asked them was, who knows most about technology? And again, no surprises there. We then asked them, when it comes to getting your ideas about careers, who are you going to? So the people who they have seconds before deemed completely untrustworthy when it comes to choosing their mobile phone, they're quite happy to talk about their careers. And this is a real issue because parents do not know. I've been a parent, I did not know. You know your own industry, you know absolutely nothing about anything else. Parents are hopeless when it comes to advising young people. And in terms of where they are in terms of learning really useful technologies, again, you might find this quite interesting. So this is what's happening in Swansea. And it's being replicated. We've seen a growing number of young people learning how to code or teaching themselves if they're not actually being taught at school, which I think is really encouraging. Now, you saw that room full of young people. One of the first things we asked them to do is to draw a picture of scientists and technologists and engineers. So how many of those students do you think drew a woman? There are 300. And the answer was 8. This is what they draw. So, although on the one hand, actually, this is a point where I always feel slightly uneasy because then I start to spot people who do look like this in the audience, which is always a little bit unsettling. But even though they are using technology and they love technology, they still don't really get what it might be like to work in those fields. And it's a crying shame because a lot of talent is going to waste. And this is why you have such an important role to play, because you are their role models. What do people who really look like, who work in technology? This is what they look like. This is my daughter. I'll try not to talk about her for too long because I will go into proud mother syndrome, but she works for a software company, very specialized software, a company called ITRS, and they make software for trading floors and for banks. The fact that she's working in technology is a complete accident and has nothing to do with me or her school. And this is what we have to avoid, because this was a very happy accident that Rose found her way, and she's absolutely brilliant at it and is responsible for most of you. And now I will stop talking about Rose, otherwise we will never get through, and I can see we've only got 5 minutes left. But young people need to see these kind of role models, and they need to understand, because this is where the opportunities are going to be. Again, if you just reflect on this, I mean, how many job vacancies, not people working in the industries, this is obviously a pan-European figure, but how many vacancies, how many companies desperately trying to find the right kind of people will there be? 900,000 across Europe. So you want to make sure, we need to make sure that young people have the opportunity to go for those jobs, that they have the right skills. There's an organisation, and I found out about it quite recently, called the IT Corporate Forum, and they've done some quite interesting research, one of which was around job titles, and they've got 6,000 people using their forum, so out of curiosity they checked out how many job titles there were. And the answer was 3,000. That's why it's so hard for teachers or any of us to really advise young people, because you feel that the world of technology is just sort of exploding. And the important thing is that teachers and parents should know that we don't know anything, so that we encourage young people to explore the world. And that's what we try and do at TeenTech. And I need to say there are lots of other really good organisations as well, but obviously I know my own, so I just want to say what I think is important. And that is, talking to kids, I don't think, is good. You need to get the kids doing things. Help them feel what it would be like to work in your industries. Think of creative ways that you can show them how to do that. We work with two of the country's top app designers, and we do a session on app design, which we produce with an organisation called Apps for Good. The ideas that the young people come up with are awesome, and we encourage them to take them forward, and we show them how they can. We also have an exhibition area and a challenge zone where it's very hands-on, and we say, yes, if you want to work with the BBC, you could be a weather forecaster. On the other hand, think about all of the research and development that goes on in the BBC. I mean, you've just heard a tiny bit of it described. You could be part of that. These teams that were challenged to shoot and edit a video within half an hour. They had to do a 3-minute video. And then the winners were taken to see where all of those massive outside broadcast trucks are built and how they're built at Sony, just outside Basingstoke. We also say that yes, there are massive organisations like the BBC or Google or Cisco or Airbus, but the majority of people will work in small companies, and they are really creative, and they need the same kind of skills. So this is Glasseye. They're a digital company who do sort of digital promotion of movies. There's 3 people working in that company. They do really cool things. So we sort of share some of the really creative work that's being done in the digital industries so that the kids can see they could be doing this themselves. Kate Stone, do Google her company called Navalia. She does some awesome things with printed electronics. And so when the kids see that you can make a poster, and then with a Wi-Fi connection, you can go up to the poster and you can tap the drums and you can play drums on it, or you can print a deck and then you can mix your own music. It's a really inspiring thing for them to see. So a mix of things. It's not just big companies, it's smaller companies. They can set up their own thing. And we do take their ideas really seriously. This is an ideas wall at one of our events. And because the ideas were so good, we then thought we can't just pick a few winners. This seems a very facile thing to do. So we set up something called the TeenTech Awards. And the thing that's different about this is that the kids can come up with their idea, and they are allowed and encouraged to collaborate. So they can collaborate with companies, they can collaborate with universities. The kids have NDAs to protect their ideas. We've got the first award ceremony coming up on the 24th of June, and I'm madly excited about it. When the projects were coming through, I almost wanted to cry because they were just so good. And already, at least 4 of them have turned into real student enterprises and have been earmarked as marketable ideas, which is madly exciting. Why people don't take young people's ideas more seriously like this, I really don't know. And if you don't believe that you can make a difference by talking to young people, by encouraging them to see what your industry is all about, I just want you to look at this. Now, this is the beginning of the day, and you can sort of see how there's a big column there for the fact that if only they knew a bit more about what you guys did, they might be a little bit more interested. And then this is the end of the day. And I'm not pretending we've turned them all into techies and engineers, but they've certainly, and particularly the girls, have gone away with something to really think about. And then, you know, we collect all sorts of feedback, so you can sort of see how they think and feel. And so I just want to finish by saying, I know that Tomorrow's World was really, really inspiring, and it really inspired me. But what I was so aware of when I was working on the programme, that when I was that kid sitting on that beach in Skegness, I had absolutely no idea how rich the area of technology was and how many jobs I would have loved to have done. Now, with TeenTech, that's what I've tried to do for another generation. And so while I'm here, I just want to really sort of task each and every one of you to reach out to young people and to go out there and do something, because you just never know, that one moment where you touch them that will be the moment that inspires them, that makes them think, actually, I could do this. And it's an immeasurably satisfying thing to do. And so with that, can I just find out who's won? This is what I always manage to... Okay, I think there were about 11 or 12 questions. So did anyone get all of them right? Okay. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And did anyone get 5 right? Is someone waving a hand? Yeah. Yes, excellent. Okay, so a bottle of champagne for you. All right, sort of nab me afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Cheers.